Can start. The rains have stopped and I think it's an auspicious day for SFAD. No? Isang magandang umaga po sa ating lahat and welcome to the first colloquium of the School of Fine Arts and Design titled Cultural Producers of Today, Resonating a Praxis of Creative Research and Convergence Pedagogy. I'm Noel Cuizon and I'll be your host for today's colloquium. First, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Dumlao, the Dean of Information Technology of PWU, and the guests. No? Welcome to our first colloquium. No? Now, with the challenges of these new online exchanges, I'd like to remind everyone of the rules of engagement in Zoom. Please turn off your mics and siguro yung videos, no, while we're having the proceedings, no. And then we can you're feel free to to post your questions and concerns or your comments in the chat box, and then we'll attend to it after the 2 or maybe more than 2 hour session, no. Now, as we proceed, allow me to provide you with the background on this first undertaking of SFAD, no, in holding this academic conference. This colloquium is a product of a concerted effort of the School of Fine Arts and Design with our Dean Josephine Turalba in cooperation with the Research Development Office of PWU. This transpired after a series of webinars, no, held in conjunction with the faculty development programs regarding creative research, no, during the surge of the pandemic last year. Now, its main objective is to give a perspective on how art and design educators, industry practitioners, no, and even art managers and theoreticians claim their positions as cultural producers at present. In the process of negotiation within the intervention of various circumstances, the challenge these cultural shapers face now is perhaps how to translate cultural production as part of research by defining the institution's program objectives, its purpose, goals, and values into an avenue for critical discourse that is within the academic sphere. The pandemic has allowed us to venture on various possibilities in online engagements as a continuum of the convergence pedagogy that is strongly espoused by PWU. Now, this convergence pedagogy has been shared by the former university president, Sir Tico, no? Francisco Benitez, and it has 4 components. No? Basically, it's history, aesthetics, production, and critique. No? Now, today's discussion will cover, from my estimation, 3 significant points. No? First is the importance of creative research in the academic field, no? And the various potentials which an artist or designer as researcher can explore, no, in relation to his or her theory and practice. No? Second would be the relevance of this convergence of information and practice, no, in agreement with the conditions we have in art and cultural production, as well as in organizing. This is set as one of our main trajectories. Lastly, and to complete the equation, would be the professional identity of these cultural producers or influencers, no, as a result of innumerable negotiations in relation to their roles as active facilitators and agencies for social change. As a vanguard in art education, the PWU School of Fine Arts and Design has lived up to its reputation as a learner-centered university that engages students in several experimental and explorative activities. It has been a pioneer in visual arts research since the 60s and the 70s, as exemplified in its workshop organized one, the Center for Visual Printmaking, and other studio arts group initiatives like the Pintan Webe, kite flying events, no, among others. Now, through the years, it has also encouraged students to explore the visual art practice in the expanded field. No? Today, we are upholding this tradition by initiating more art and cultural projects through various institutional partnerships. And now to echo with us this dynamic culture of collaboration with the academy are our esteemed speakers. No? We have Ana Katrina Ocol, Maria Benvenida Candelaria, and Love Asis. No? By way of introduction, our first speaker, AK Ocol, is a self-taught artist based in Las Piñas City. After pursuing her graduate degree in PWU, she joined the MFAD program as one of its faculty members. Currently, she is undergoing apprenticeship as a tattoo artist. Good morning, AK.
Good morning, sir.
Our next speaker is Love Asis. No? She is a respected professor in the Visual Communications Department of SFAD, where she teaches core subjects like interactive multimedia, computer arts, and digital arts. She has also earned her degree in Masters of Arts in Fine Arts and Design at PWU. A pleasant day to you, Miss Love.
Hi, sir. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, everyone.
Miss Love Asis. The third speaker for today is a colleague, no? Whom we all fondly call Mambing. She has been at the SFAD longer than any one of us in the faculty. She's a MCAD specialist, and she guides our learners professionally at the Interior Design Department, initially for the board examination and eventually preparing them for industry practice. Our third speaker, an esteemed associate, a friend, and a respected educator, Architect Benvenida Candelaria. Magandang umaga, Ma'am Bing.
Magandang umaga. Looking forward to our
Welcome.
interaction today.
Thank you, Ma'am Bing. So part of the success of SFAD's first colloquium will not only depend on the information and data our presenters will be sharing today. Moreover, a critical evaluation based on the synthesis of all these presentations will be central in this whole academic discourse. No? Anchoring on this paradigm, SFAD has decided to invite one of the country's most competent curators and cultural producers to be the keynote moderator for today's colloquium. Simply put, she's someone who will analyze these visual art practices towards diverse and effective research directions. Cultural producer herself, our arbitrator for today is a doctor of philosophy in Philippine studies, and she has earned her Master's of Arts in Art History from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. She has also completed short focus programs at the Institute of Media and Entertainment in New York and at Keio University in Japan. Among her many cultural engagements and undertakings are cultural consultancies for Gallery Genesis, the Museo de Intramuros, and other independent ventures. Likewise, a co-curatorial post for the International Traveling Exhibition Field Trip Project through a grant from the Japan Foundation. Our esteemed moderator has contributed in academic journals, published books, and contributed chapters of books under Bibal Publishing, authored a book on Pro Ecclesia, E. Pontifice Award recipient, Willie Tadeo Lai, for whom she curated the artist's second solo exhibition at the NCCA Gallery. She also authored a corresponding monograph published by the institution. Her other publications include Now Here, Access, Activate, Rewind for the Erewhon Center for the Arts, and a book on Grandmaster of Philippine Aquarelle, Toti Serna. She is also a member of several prestigious professional organizations such as the International Society of Ethnology and Folklore, International Council of Museums, or ICOM, International Council on Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, and is a trustee at the Heritage Conservation Society, or the HCS. Currently, she is the Deputy Executive Director of the Nayang Filipino Foundation at Casablanca, Plaza San Luis in Intramuros, Manila, where she provides technical expertise in implementing projects for the Heritage Space Program of the recently reformed Nayong Filipino Foundation. This includes the conceptualization and strategic execution of programs for a museum of ethnographic collections and a creative hub in an urban forest. Mga kaibigan, let's all welcome Dr. Laya Boquirin Gonzalez.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, a rainy morning to all. And thank you so much for that generous introduction, Mr. Noel Cuizon. It's really an honor for me to open this colloquium, the first of a series I heard, organized by the Philippine Women's University School of Fine Arts and Design. Hello. Shall I continue, Dr. Cuizon, or would you like
Yes, ma'am. Dr.
Right.
Laya will be our moderator for today. Maybe we can start now, Dr. Boquirin.
All right. Thank you for turning over the virtual floor, Mr. Noel Cuizon. I really commend the institution, the PWU SFAD, for promoting a culture of research among artists and teaching artists through valorization efforts like this. I personally have a profound appreciation for this kind of direction. I have met a few PWU alumni. A lot of them are artists, very active in the art scene, who carry such outlook, not just in the Philippines, but overseas. In initiating artist-run spaces, for example, breaking the boundaries across transnational borders, facilitating exchanges. So I have a profound admiration for artists, alumni from PWU. So it's inspiring that the kind of practice they present is they underscore the idea that artistic production is really beyond the logic and the dictum of optics and beyond disinterested pleasure or self-expression. So I have a profound admiration for them. And Dr. Dean Torralba, Dean Jing Torralba was a classmate of mine decades ago in an elective at the Film Institute that we took. So my admiration really goes as far as that. So I approach this series that you have. This series is at once platform and opportunity for the generation of knowledge and creative products. And I approach this from the lens of a hub leader, overseeing programs for capacity building, museum collections with a creative outlay, and the generation of knowledge products, case studies, and reports. And if there's anything I have learned from my humbling and many times disappointing yet worthwhile experience, it is that research, creative production, and the formation of capacity building must be interlocked and symbiotic. The connections must be linked to not just the institution itself, so that it doesn't become too insular, but the connections must be linked to a wider network that you have. So this wider network may be a network of academic institutions. It might be a network of hubs. It might be a wider network of creative research itself. That includes two or more of these. So it's I really look forward to the day that the PWU SFAD will be spearheading or perhaps being co-creators of such a network. When I shared your poster yesterday, so someone from another institution was inquiring as early as that about this kind of creative research network, the possibilities of coming up with that. And the pandemic really brings us a good opportunity because it's so easy to meet now. You cannot say, ay, na-traffic ako, no? Or ma-traffic kasi dyan, or baha, no? As an excuse. Well, at least unless you have a power outage. No? So it's so easy to meet now. While we are practicing social distancing measures or general community quarantine with enhanced restrictions, plus, whatever the term it is now, come to think of it, no, it really also offers a set of opportunities, no, but the set of opportunities is also, we cannot ignore the class lines and the accessibility, limitations to accessibility, in terms of the availability of a good internet connection and all that, even the availability of technology. So nevertheless, we are offered with such opportunities to network beyond our academic institutions, beyond our own geographic locales. And I believe this is what the PWU is starting also. There are several institutions along Taft only, that has been doing that, for the past maybe more than a year or so, and it's just inspiring the kind of networks we are now intensifying, even though we are interacting with each other with our avatarized selves on social media, or perhaps even though the interaction is unfolding mediated by screens. The possibilities are endless. So I trust that this colloquium series shall problematize what is the role of artists in social development. I'm responding based on the description of this colloquium. And to begin with, what do we mean by social development? Are there indicators that can measure? And if so, what is the role of creativity in making cities more sustainable, perhaps? And what do we exactly mean by cultural influencers or perhaps creative enablers? What does it take to negotiate despite, and I quote from the TPWU, the conundrum and concurrence of circumstances? And finally, how do you strengthen the praxis of inquiry in your artistic productions? And what is the link between your artistic praxis and pedagogy in higher education? It's very important that fine art schools offer an end-to-end support for creative practitioner, not just in terms of artistic production, but also in research, theory, history, curation, perhaps interpretation and presentation of artistic heritage, and perhaps even creative entrepreneurship, if you may, now that we have the Creative Industries Act being lobbied in Congress. So without further ado, I'm really excited to begin this productive session by introducing all the speakers one by one as we transition presentation. So I'll be introducing each speaker, each faculty artist one by one, and then the speaker can now present right after I introduce. So I will begin with A.K. Ocol. A.K. Ocol, as mentioned by Mr. Cuizon, is a self-taught artist based in Las Piñas City. She graduated from the De La Salle University with a degree in psychology and pursue pursued her graduate degree in fine arts at the PWU SFAD, where she also currently teaches. So you see immediately the transdisciplinary connections and how this will be embedded, or thus this will impact the body of works of AK also. She is also one of the finalists of the 2019 Mullenlow Nova Awards Manila. She works with a variety of media, including glitch-based drawings. Perhaps she can explain for the benefit of her audience what she means by glitch-based drawings, and new media, such as video and data bending. So data bending too, you might want to elaborate on that for the benefit of our listeners. In her process, artistic process, AK seeks to explore issues in representation, identity, and how the limits of spaces can affect personal narratives. Her recent experimentations involve her deep interest in virtual spaces and video games. Perhaps this is really instantiated in a recent virtual exhibition that we did. So I exhibitions. Her most recent solo exhibition was done in 2020. It's titled Still Life in a Room Everywhere Beyond the World. It's a virtual exhibition. And in 2019, transmission in House of Frida in Bacolod, Negros Occidental. Incidentally, she also had an artist residency in Silay City, Negros Occidental in 2019. I think this is the one initiated by Solo Loxine, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then in 2019, Nonlinear, Mono 8 Gallery in Manila. So those are her solo exhibitions. She has a lot of group exhibitions in Metro Manila and elsewhere, even in Bliss on Bliss art projects in Bogota, Colombia. I think this was the inauguration of Jed Marino's Bliss on Bliss in 2020. So congratulations. It's really inspiring to see all these exhibitions. And in 2021, you have another group exhibition, several in fact, in the Centraland, Gallery Roberto, Futurist, Ocular Gallery. It's fascinating how galleries survive despite the pandemic and despite physical mobility. So a big congratulations, and it's really a pleasure to meet you online finally, AK Okal. I turn over the virtual floor to you.
Thank you, Miss Laya. Okay, let me share my window. Okay, so can anyone see that? Is it presenting?
Perfect.
Okay. So thank you, Miss Laya, for that introduction. That was really great. A really extensive introduction for the first time. So I guess I have to answer the glitch-based drawing. So I will show later. But basically, for this colloquium, I wanted to talk about an idea, or like a crazy idea I had last 2020. So I call it crazy because I wanted to call it crazy perhaps because the idea was leaning towards something unconventional versus what the art world usually expects in an artist. It has to be painterly beautiful, or it has to be tangible. Sometimes I call it a joke, but just to muse the idea in my head. But it was a crazy idea in 2020 that materialized during the last months of 2020 pandemic. So Still Life in a Room was if you notice the title, it's a binary. So it's a play on a binary between being in a room and everywhere, traveling. So I was humoring the idea na this one person, or currently us, we're almost always stuck in the room now, but like everywhere, our mind is like everywhere, traveling in different browsers, different meetings, and so on. So that was the funny idea behind Still Life in a Room and Everywhere Beyond the World. So I wanted to show this. So this was the artwork. It was actually situated in Google Sheets. So it's an artwork made in Google Sheets containing several archives of my video search strings, or everything I searched starting from March 15, or was it March 17 when the pandemic started. So I exhibited it as a solo exhibition under Biennale No, which was like an initiative for online archiving and online exhibits. And then when it was finally made public, I decided to recatalog it in its physical form just for fun in IG. And how do I say this? Like, document myself in IG as a form of some sort of a performance na rin. Because like I was taking the role of a librarian in cataloging and working from archives of what I did in the first few quarters of pandemic. So a lot of people are probably wondering, like, why make artwork in Google Sheets, diba? And then why declare it a solo exhibition? So when I was talking with my friend about this, and knowing that it was a 15-minute talk, we like brainstormed, and then we determined like 3 points in the artwork that I wanted to talk. So one is my criticism about the role of the white cube during the pandemic, and perhaps the post-pandemic na rin, and creating art history. So what is our future for artists, especially now that we've experienced ika nga the lowest of the low, or the worst manifestation of capitalism? What is our future now post-pandemic? And then in this artwork, I was also like asking about yung offline and online self. Like, are they the same? And different expressions of postmodern identities, and what I call the endless reconstruction or curation of the self. And eventually, when you talk about data, you also tackle the rise of surveillance capitalism. So this is where we talk about the data as resource. So we will get to those points later. So I created my work in Google Sheets, partly because ever since my residency in Silay, the one Miss Laya mentioned, ever since that residency in Silay, I think I was very much interested in cultural geography na. So I have a geographer friend who teaches in UP. And then in one of our conversations, she just brought up that maybe I would be a better fit now in geography, and said na in geography, you can map everything, including culture and identity. And that sort of changed my life. And I managed to execute this in one of my works in Silay. So this was my solo exhibition in Frida, one of the centerpieces in that exhibition. So I call it a non-space panorama. So in the table, I created like a map of the place I was staying in. Basically, the residency house, para siyang pinagtagpi-tagping houses from different ancestral homes that weren't maintained. And it was a beautiful house kasi parang for me it contained a lot of memories from different objects. Tapos binuo siya into a hodgepodge residency house. So I wanted to take a piece of these maps and then make erasure drawings out of them. So parang I was rubbing in this table, I was rubbing the textures of the house, every part of it, different objects in the house. So I created like a map on the table. So the artwork naman is a glitch-based drawing. So when you say a glitch-based drawing, so it's technologically assisted. I create glitches first from different kinds of JPEGs. And then I try to destroy yung coding niya and then create an image out of it. So I was talking about the possibility of creating of what a society will become if data was what do you call that? If data was twisted, or you could say fake news. So this was in 2019. And then this was the finalist work for the Mullen Law. So eventually we'll find out, or not really eventually, but we're already discovering that several governments, even outside the Philippines, the reason why nanalo sila sa voting was because of these manipulated data. So I wouldn't say that it was a prediction, but like the fact na you can do a lot with data nowadays is actually pretty, creepy. But that was my work. So I was wanting to talk about imagined landscapes. And the inspiration was that hodgepodge house, residency house. So may fast forward to the pandemic, which was March 15 or 17, very very cloudy na in my memory. We all witnessed how nagpanic lahat. Everyone panicked to go home, na stranded sila in different checkpoints. And then a part of me was like, I was feeling dreadful na like for me, I had a lot of questions. Like first was like, it didn't feel like I can make beautiful works anymore. Kasi I remember this poem by Wisława Szymborska. The reason why her poems are straightforward is because after the war, you can't really make beautiful works anymore. You only have this straightforward language na. And I was feeling that. So I was also wondering na what kind of environment are we in? Where are we in this brutal transition? Kasi I was also reading about liminal spaces na, like that. There's a whole anthropological theory about it, and it became a meme for some reason in the internet, which you can check out in YouTube. So another main question was, where do I place myself? Or saan ako lulugar? Like, how do I map myself? So while I was having these questions then, my friends in the arts were at the same time, they were making FB pages na, FB groups, FB pages, kasi they wanted to collect what could be in the future pandemic art. So they were already trying to define what pandemic art is. And I was like thinking then, like, what is pandemic art, diba? How do you paint yourself in this situation? Because it's very shocking, or like we were all displaced. So how do you paint yourself? And so I was wondering na, how do you make a self-portrait of yourself? At the same time, we also saw how, or witnessed how we never had like a priorities of culture and arts, and suddenly we were tagged non-essential. So when the galleries were down, artists were also down. We all fell. Nung nawala yung galleries, artists were wondering, sana tayo? Like, they also don't know where to go, like, saan sila lulugar, and they don't know any, or I don't know where to get my main income, kasi what if we lose our job anytime? And then a lot of artists are full-time artists. When we were making this research in PW about artists in quarantine, that was like the main sentiment is, where will we find work, or where will we find income na to pay for rent, for food? And it was very sad. So it was like, I was like sinking into like, I wouldn't say depression, but like really bitter about things na. So the whole art scene was confused and clueless. Eventually, I think in the last or third quarter of the year, we see digital galleries pop up na. For me, it was great, but I was starting to wonder why my reaction was, for me, I felt like it wasn't enough. So that time, obviously, during the pandemic, I was just playing because I'm a gamer. Like, I've been always honest about being a hardcore gamer, and gaming was what I always did during the confusing part of the pandemic. So I was thinking about video games that time, and at the same time, I was teaching new media art then. So, we were talking about Walter Benjamin and a lot of things. But with video games, what made me think about video games and this initiative to make this Google Sheets art was the video games, art didn't have to be an object. So hindi kailangan ng object siya. It was just the experience. And so I was also thinking about going back to new media class. I was thinking about Walter Benjamin and how he talked about the artistic aura. And so I parang relocated those questions. I directed it in how I see the art scene. For me, it was how can we be independent from the galleries during situations like these, during crisis especially, para makakita tayo ng income. And for the galleries, I was wondering na I wanted to interrogate the question na how can we contextualize works online? So it doesn't have to be just a photo on a digital wall. And for me, the digital wall of the gallery, that 3D wall na you can see in Kunst Matrix websites and art steps, is very symbolic of how very institutional yung gallery when it comes to exhibitions. Na an exhibition wouldn't exist, at least for me, without the idea of the gallery. Like, saan ka mag-exhibit? For me, like, I wanted to have this impulse to at least break that wall. So while we were discussing new media art, I came across an internet art that I love so much when I was in grad school. So it was Olia Lialinas, My Boyfriend Came Back from the War. So the artwork was actually just a website that was powered by multiple GIFs. And then you click it. It's like a choose your own adventure, but it's very open-ended and you don't know kung may ending ba siya. It's very non-linear. So it was made during the time of Web 1.0. So yung Web 1.0 was the time where everyone had a webmaster and accessibility to website wasn't shared. So net art was actually a movement that was created in the 90s during the time of crisis, much like how pandemic started then. So it started during the cultural crisis of the 1990s, specifically after the fall of Berlin Wall in the Soviet Union. So with works like these, it amazed me kasi the human impulse was to always communicate. That's the new media impulse then. The new media gesture was to communicate. And new media works always exist during times of limitations and they create boundaries. For instance, net art was born because of political boundaries, economical crisis. And so goes the many themes of new media art. So I was inspired by that. And so by this time, I was already having this funny thought na I want to archive or obsessively archive everything I consumed na video sa YouTube in a database sheet. Because I was thinking na if I would paint a self-portrait of myself, it would be my current state, especially in the pandemic. And my current state in the pandemic was actually like an overworked, bitter millennial. So I had like two to three jobs that time and another graveyard shift and many side gigs. I was like, my life was surrounded by multiple Google Sheets of just worksheets, tas may biometrics. And I even had a time app that would check if I was working, and if my mouse wasn't working, it would prompt the whole screen. You seem very quiet. Are you still working? And then, ayun, it was anxiety inducing then. So, with the Google Sheets, I wanted to poke fun. Then with the idea na during the first few months of the pandemic, everyone wanted to like just be in this mode of hyper productivity, na which is super weird. Na since hindi na separate yung time between work and home, everyone thought na if you're at home, you're not productive. So nagkaroon ng culture of hyper productivity, which for me was very intense. And what hyper productivity symbolizes for me is exactly this, the Google Sheet, which I experience every day until now. So ayun, I cataloged as early as October 2020. It was already in my brain. Like sabi ko, I wanted to catalog this. And I wanted to declare it as a solo exhibition on my own. So one of the gestures then, why I wanted to say na it's a solo exhibition, is I wanted to do something, at least parang something empowering for myself as an artist who don't know their place during the pandemic. I did something independent from the gallery system. Na exhibition doesn't always have to be within the gallery walls. Na if that was my symbolic way of destroying the 4D walls, I would. So I started cataloging October 2020 and checked all of my files from March 2020, and it's still continuing until now. I just paused the project kasi it was getting overwhelming then, like, you know, cataloging yourself every day. But it was also fun kasi you're working back in time na, oh, this is what happened pala noon, and you get to see pieces of memory also embedded in those archives, those videos. So I started in March 2020 because it was the monumental announcement that we would be in lockdown in the Philippines. And then when it was released for Biennale, no, I created a small hard catalog using Dewey Decimal. So I had to relearn it, yung Dewey Decimal system, and adopt it sa contemporary times. And I was like, a lot of people were asking me, why Dewey Decimal? Kasi back then, Dewey Decimal was like the pivotal form of classification, of taxonomy. So I wanted to use that. And eventually, I guess with the physical objects, I still want to exhibit them somehow. Figuring out how to show. So I recreated the online Google Sheet database as an offline performance of cataloging these video files, especially on IG. I highlighted them as a IG, what do you call that? IG highlights. I declared it as a solo exhibition because for me, I wanted to do something outside the gallery and say na, oh, I did it. And basically, I was thinking like the better way to contextualize a work in the internet is not just pasting, you know, taking a photo of an artwork, but using the internet itself as a medium. So this was my work. So eventually, while I was archiving, especially when naging physical object na siya, and you're working backwards, you also get to, you know, realize yung binary ng offline and online self. So the work was, of course, a portrait, and the idea was to create a representation of myself. I mentioned in one of my notes during cataloging that this gesture was no different from the still lives ng Renaissance, yung mga trophy paintings, and basically merchant, yung nakikita mo yung textiles nila, the portrait of rich merchants with their textiles. They were no different kasi all in all, you know, textiles, rabbits, fruits, food na imported na you can see that time and then painted. They commissioned an artist to paint. It was also an archive of consumption then. So they were mapping in a way that the artists were accidentally mapping what they didn't have and what they had that time. Ano yung pinapang-trade nila, especially with food. You get to see the evolution of the watermelon in older paintings, and then you realize na the watermelon now is different because of, you know, farming, new modern technological applications of agriculture na rin. So at the same time, people that time was like mapping what they could boast, what they had. I was wondering, while in the contemporary times we tend to focus on archiving or hoarding physical objects, but I was also thinking na we tend to forget our digital breadcrumbs then. So what I showed right now is one of my IG highlighted notes, because at the same time while I was cataloging, I was reflecting on why I'm doing this, and my mind, I keep on rambling lang when I was cataloging. So you could say it's a work of a crazy person in pandemic, I guess. But the other instance of that is yung confrontation then of the identity. Na you tend to project yourself, but then you also have this, deep iceberg or deep abyss of your search strings. So this reminds me of how in the early days of the web, web 1.0, there was, as how my friend put it, yung ironic sense of sharing and disclosing yourself online, especially to the unknown public. If you remember MySpace and LiveJournal, so we had those blogs and personal spaces where we would like just pour ourselves and project something so the viewer, the anonymous public can understand you. So it was reminiscent of how Jacques Lacan described as humanity's way of seeking understanding, but we will never be understood. So there's this never-ending solitude, which is why I called it still life in a room. So it becomes a reconstruction of ourselves, and especially during that time, especially in LiveJournal, there was this dream, of the endless recreation of oneself. So while it is like an endless solitude, at the same time, it is also empowering in a cyborg feminist context, wherein the idea of self-disclosure is often freeing yourself from the language that oppresses you outside in the real world. So that offline world. So our presence online is an endless remaking of ourselves through our digital breadcrumbs. So that's, if you're familiar of the meme, si Raven and Tara, the two teenagers who posted their goth lives in YouTube, and of course, MySpace, where you can fully edit your own personal space to reflect yourself now. But at the same time, when you are cataloging yourself and what you consume, dito din papasok na you are coincidentally cataloging everywhere around you. And so this is where the binary of that title comes, yung everywhere beyond the world. So I was cataloging, so internet doesn't have a linear sense of time. It's a plane na recurring artifacts from the web. We think it's new. That happens when you share a lot of things, diba? You tend to see this news as new, pero turns out published na pala siya 3 years ago. So that's what I mean na internet doesn't have a linear time. In this case, I was cataloging different objects from the digital world. Some of them occurred at the same time, and some of them recurring, like memes. For instance, I saw na March pala si Dalgona Coffee. So I was also interested in that Dalgona Coffee craze. I was like, alam mo yun, being the receiving end of that meme or that pop culture trend, you also consume it. So the impulse was to, okay, how do I look for tutorials of that? So na-record si Dalgona Coffee in my search string. And then of course, during the time of pandemic, nandun din si Joe Exotic and other mimetic personalities. At the same time, I wasn't just, accidentally cataloging these, but I was cataloging personal experience, especially when we had a COVID exposure at home. So my mom was exposed to COVID during her work. And then one of the, of course, reactions right now, na if you're sick, you go to the internet and see, like, what are the symptoms? Is this a sign? So you can see there, in March 24, 18, and 19, I kept on searching for how does it feel to have COVID? How does it feel to have a swab test? What does a swab test look like? So that was like an obsessive searching kasi I was also trying to feel less anxious kasi a lot of people were known to die. And of course, yung nanay ko senior that time. So I was actually scared. I wasn't showing it, but it showed in my search strings. So March 1918 to 24 comprised my mom's, what do you call that? Quarantine. So it was, okay. So because of that, yung online and offline self and archiving every day, I wanted to point out this important part in my statement na I wrote there na categorization is a double-edged sword. Looking at things, accumulating things, defining things is also defines the one who categorizes or the user. So I am also, the fact that I am sharing, so I put this Google Sheet publicly for 1 month, December 10, 2020 to January 10, 2021. I'm also very disclosing this search string. So, alam niyo yun, like, for instance, we're in an FX and then yung katabi mo nag-i-internet and you can't help but peep. Diba? It's very voyeuristic in a sense na you rummage through someone's search string. So, I was disclosing all of that information and I was wondering na if this is how I recreated myself online, how do others perceive me? So one of the ideas there was, I was thinking it's important to also point out that when we talk about categorization, we also point out the people who look, or that, that anonymous public. Now, who is that entity that defines us? So what happens now, basically, kasi I keep on talking about Web 1.0 and that was the 90s. We are actually in the Web 2.0. During the Web 1.0, funny nagiging history na ng internet. But like during the Web 1.0, the net artists, they were aware that the internet is highly constructed and controlled by a structure, especially corporations, so their impulse to create artworks in the internet was to challenge yung windows and yung browsers, their function. They wanted to also, like, breaking down the gallery walls, the digital gallery walls. They wanted to test yung limits ng function ng internet because, yun nga, with Web 1.0, the internet was centralized on one webmaster. So their question was always, how do you share public space? So their dream was to hack it. So what about Web 2.0? So if you look here, the left side, this is an artwork by Sumoto.iki. So it's called Web 2 Disaster. So it's actually a skeleton of what the internet now, the contemporary internet, looks like without user content, without your activities, without your cookies, without your digital breadcrumbs. It is blank. So one of the ideas of Web 2.0 was to release the users from the centralization of the webmaster and give agency now to the users. We have more freedom to choose. We're free now. But the irony with freedom is that you will gain more freedom if surveillance is heightened. So it is one of those more surveillance was necessary in order to guarantee hard-won freedom from tyranny, or how we adapted into capitalism's latest mutation. So that was my favorite mangled quote from the genealogy of privacy. So this was one of my last notes while I was cataloging in IG. I was talking about this brutal splitting of the self. So I wanted to add how in my last IG catalog notes before I posted, because I kept insisting that there is another self in a digital world, a person that's so different from this um this offline world. So since the digital world is often, dismissed by most people as a millennial or Gen Z pastime, or what you call na yung kaka-computer mo yan, we tend to gloss over what I believe is yung brutal splitting na yun. So I wanted to keep coining lakan here. Because it's like a Lacanian mirror face where the observer or the user projects themselves sa internet. But then there is another entity that creates a picture of ourselves with our digital breadcrumbs. So yun yung mirror face na you look at yourself and you say na this isn't me. I can never achieve that. So who is that someone recreating myself? Yun yung question then, especially when there is eventually that entity that ultimately rearranges your breadcrumbs. So I guess to end this talk, I want to talk about, I will read what I wrote here. Na Web 2.0's promise na is to decentralize the internet, remove the gatekeepers, and give more agency to its users. However, Web 2.0's archival capability of user information, data, and consumption contradicts this promise and brings forth new centers of power. So that's what you read in every terms and agreements when you download an app or you open a social media. In this case, what they have of you, yung information, your consumption online, archives are never neutral. So we know that from the museum, from history, especially now sa internet. So, as the internet rule goes, you cannot really erase something from the internet. Someone is benefiting from that. I want to argue then how we are long past the age of information, but we are on the age of curation. So we are curating ourselves, and there is someone curating our identities for us. So this also reminds me yung conquest of spices during the colonial past. In the contemporary times, however, the most valuable spice right now is reassembled pieces of information that you logged in online. So these are necessary to recreate a representation of every user. So in most extreme cases, these reassemblings can take the form of facts. So we see that from fake news, fake accounts, trolls, etc. With reassembled pieces of our identities online, and what we gloss over, it's usually used by businesses or advertising agents or maybe social media to create a perfect picture of yourself. And this is why sometimes when you talk to someone sa Messenger, Twitter, IG, and then you scroll sa newsfeed nyo, you see na parang, did my phone hear me because I was talking about this product and I get advertisements of this product? That's the thing. So they're not listening to your phone, but you already gave those information from the very start. They have in some way a Google sheet of you as well. So we are in the Web 2.0, pero we're transitioning na slowly to Web 3.0. I just realized because we are slowly integrating machines, and these machines are used to fine tune how they would create another entity, another representation of ourselves online. So this also begs the question, na who am I in the internet? How do others perceive me? And then, are my choices online real, or was I made to click it? So I go back to this quote. So categorization is a double-edged sword. Looking at things, accumulating things, defining things, this also defines you. So that's the end of my talk.
Wow. Thank you very much, Professor Okol, for that
Thank you, Sir Nuki.
insightful presentation. No? I must say you cope well creatively with the complexities of this pandemic and the new normal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Now I
Thank you
give
very
the
much.
floor to the virtual floor to transition and give her comments and reaction to our speaker, Dr. Bukirin.
Yeah, thank you, AK, and thank you, Mr. Cuizon. I just want to commend AK, hooray for your crazy ideas, as you would say. I really love it. It's very timely, this intensified move from the tangible and perhaps the continuing post-aesthetic turn. And at the same time, your incorporation of ideas from ludology and Donna Haraway's cyborg theory. It's not just that. No, she mentioned a host of several other theories from Lacan, and then theories on liminality. No, and then I'm just struck. No, so I just like to quickly respond with your last words. No, when you said to what extent when you talked about choice. Concerning our digital footprint or digital breadcrumbs, you mentioned you problematize to what extent are these choices or limitations, are we curating, or are these being curated for us? So it reminded me of the idea of panopticon being participatory, in fact, no, because it is not a one-way thing. No, we are not just being watched, but we are also participating in that. So so these ideas by Zizek really resonate in what you have presented in your ideas. So I'm really fascinated. I was looking at your IG, your Instagram over the past few days. I guess you would call that stalking. And also in your social media, because these things are best appreciated with moving images and not just a PDF file that I get to get to know the speakers. So anyway, blogging, cataloging, archiving, the endless recreation of oneself that you mentioned, and the resulting afterlife of ourselves, of our works, through our digital breadcrumbs or footprint. From your search history to the activity in your Google Drive. I think these are these are the dominant keywords or key ideas mentioned by AK. So on the other hand, the productions that she makes, the productions, creations, or maybe the how she manipulates data and technology, the way she did it also allowed her to meditate on notions of the nonlinearity of time and space. So which brings me to the next point. So AK talks about the state of liminality, jumping off from Victor Turner's articulation of what he says being between and betwixt, with a pandemic as a phase of collective human suffering with, I would say, uncertain futures until today. Such intellectual reflections are really eligible during times of crisis, especially major ones like these. So often these result in these are coming from these notions of confinement and routine during the pandemic vis-a-vis our digital consumption. So maybe later on, AK can also reflect, no, in what ways does this pandemic offering is it offering opportunities for digitally connecting or disconnecting, how liberative really or how oppressive, no, are digital technologies, no. Maybe you can share some of your thoughts on that. How feasible is this new normal mode of connecting, exhibiting the self, cataloging the self, no? And in what ways are digital platforms both limiting and infinite, perhaps, no? So these are some of the provocative questions arising from the works, no, or the productions, no, of A.K. Ocol. I particularly like how she says it, no, that when she mentions Walter Benjamin's seminal essay, you know, Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Now it's not just and how it translates, no, to current practices afforded by the World Wide Web. We're not just it's no longer just information or even reproduction, no, but curating. No? So what do we mean by curating now? Now that we are confined in our spaces, no? So how does this even engage with theories and practices of curation? What becomes now of curation? No, so related to that, no, I guess we are reminded of how the pandemic seems to have shaken up dated art world models, no, with platforms of validation in the market and instruments of the state. Galleries are now trying to exhibit online via websites and Instagram, no, and you have artists making comments on that, or perhaps ranting is the more appropriate term. Now, if artists can also create their own platforms and create their own digital platforms and exhibit themselves, what becomes now of transactional models, no, in the art market? Some have a mix of offline and online exhibitions. And then here comes AK, no, declaring interventions on Google Sheets as a virtual exhibition. It's really very powerful, that kind of declaration. No? Why do we say that? No, we can perhaps revisit George Dickey and Arthur Danto's conception of the art world, where you have an artifact, no, as a candidate for appreciation after a series of consecration by art world agents. No? So now, no, in this kind of situation, no, that digitization didn't really start recently, as we all know that, no, but perhaps it's an intensification of that contemporary condition. So now what becomes of artifact? What becomes of consecrating agents and platforms even? No? How do we even redefine this notion of a platform, or this notion of the archive? No? When we have such practices, no, that involve data destruction, creation from destruction. No? So these materials and strategies used by AK is an apt metaphor for problematizing what agents can do with data, how data can bridge and at the same time divide, and at the same time, no, how this affords us digital avatarized selves. To quote from one of AK's Instagram posts, I think, no, avatarized selves experiencing disassociation. See, I really stopped you. And the distinction between online and offline selves. No? So if we can perhaps go back just a bit, no, to for more context, perhaps, no, what is this new media art, no, and are there students in this Zoom room? I think there are students in this Zoom room, no. So while I was listening to AK, no, I'm seated here right next to my bookshelves, no. So I'd like to recommend some readings, some readings in new media art, no. So I picked up this really wonderful book, no, New Media Art. It's by Mark Ribe and Rina Jana. It was, you have this? Yeah, it was published. This was published, if I'm not mistaken. No, when did I really buy this? No, I kind of forgot. I think it's early 2000. Yeah, this reading. So if you want to learn more about new media art, no, it's nice to look at related literature in the early, no, incipient perhaps, no, or beta version practices that you may have had. No, so just to share, 1994 was a watershed year in the linked histories of well, media technology and digital culture. What are some markers of that, or watershed moments? The Netscape Corporation introduced the first commercial web browser that signaled the popularity of the internet. So you have interchangeable and interlocking terms then, like new media, digital, computer, interactive art. They're often used interchangeably, no? But RINA and Tribe, no, chose to operationalize, so and sum it all up by the usage of the term new media art to talk about its use in emerging media and technologies, no, and what is basically this new media art, how was it defined at that time. I guess one tendency mentioned was the use of these technologies for political, cultural, and aesthetic possibilities. No? So you see, these are all linked. It's not just a fascination with technology. It's not just a fascination with flat or maybe now, no, three-dimensional images, no, but there's always this problematization of the liberties perhaps and restrictions afforded by these things for us, no. And then just to mention for the benefit of the students here, especially those maybe taking I don't know, art theory or art history classes, no, there are art historical antecedents, no. So the second decade of the 20th century, you have Dada, no, emerging. This is also what Donald Kuspit refers to as the post-aesthetic turn, no. So he mentions, for example, Duchamp and Duchamp's, well, ready-mades, the urinal. So what's the connection between ready-mades and what we have here, new media art, no? Some of the strategies, I guess, no, from Dada are reminiscent of the new media technologies now, no? And then you have the 1970s that brought a plethora of distinct movements like corporate parody, hacking, hacktivism, and then more recently telepresence and surveillance. And then later on, you have the incorporation of augmented reality and virtual reality. How is it? How is it different from other practices you would not otherwise categorize as new media art? I guess it's the intention, or the not just the intention, because intentions are framed in several ways, no, but the interlocking affordances, no, political, cultural, and aesthetic interventions that you may have, no. More can be read in the anthology by Mark Tribe and Rina Jana. Some of the Dadaist strategies appear in new media are photomontage, collage, performance, and then what AK just presented, databasing, archiving of the self in Google Sheets. Now, Google Sheets is so everyday, no? It's so it's something that we use on a daily basis. It's something that students and working professionals utilize heavily, no? So now the everyday is being made into a strategy, media tool, no, for artistic production, and at the same time, no, this is online, no, this can be made by anyone and not quite, no. So there's that emancipatory possibility, I guess, being offered, no, and I guess that's why I asked the question, what becomes now, no, in light of previous ideas on the art world, what is an art world, no, who are agents of the art world. Maybe later, no, AK can go back to it and reflect. Now, what becomes now of these consecrated agents and platforms? Now, you have rants all over social media now, no, with this pandemic, because of how rants, no, emerging from how they problematize the relationship between artists, no, perhaps in art galleries, or maybe even artists and institutions of the art world, no, from market to state. there, no? So those are my initial thoughts, no, that maybe we can go back to. There, no? So AK revisits issues on privacy, freedom, the latitude of liberties and surveillance afforded by the World Wide Web. AK problematized the notions of choice and curating and being curated, what becomes now to the curatorial um, as an occasional curator, you know, and as mentioned by Mr. Noel Cuizon, a cultural producer. What are curators necessary? So I think we can also think of that. Now, I know a lot of artists are so mad at curators and maybe even enablers, na creative enablers in some hubs and cultural institutions. What becomes of cultural institutions? No? So it's worthwhile to maybe have a deeper chat later on and just throw ideas around on these things. No? So thank you very much, AK, for that fascinating, fascinating presentation. I have a few more favorites from that I saw in your Instagram, no, that I saw in your Instagram. I've seen some of your works, no, if I will just mention one, no, because I'm really so fascinated by it, the Artemisia Gentileschi Pedestal 2, its toner glitch in animation format. No, so this is the explanation given by AK. No, so she said, if I may quote, Pedestal 2 is comprised of 50 pages of computer-assisted toner glitch, and she says it's a metaphor for what we call saidna, sagad na sagad na. So I really like how she puts it, and I really like how she engages with gender theory using these new digital strategies that we mentioned. Now, so I would like to, we can probably have more questions later. No, I would just like to move to the next presentation. The next presentation is by Love Cabrera Asis. So Love Asis, if I may just introduce more of her works and her artistic practice. Love Asis has earned a degree in Master of Arts in Fine Arts in Philippine Women's University. Her thesis was titled The Marking of the Past, the original full-length animated films of the Philippines. It was supported with an installation. No? So a lot of her research papers are on, I noticed, no, on animation itself, no, and the animation industry in the Philippines. So for example, papers are titled The Perforation in Philippine Animation Industry, Original Content, Full-Length Animated Films. And then another is Promoting Arts and Culture Through Animation and New Media Arts as Venue for Cultural Tourism. So Love Asis gained her bachelor's degree in fine arts in advertising at the University of Santo Tomas, España, Manila in 1996, with total advertising campaign for a fast food company, hoping for a career in advertising agency. I guess a lot of artists went through a career, you know, or a stint in the advertising agency at some point. You know. Love says, no, that her lack of knowledge in computer graphics brought her to apply for a job that offers computer graphics training, which later lead her to do animation production. And since then, she was able to participate in local and animated projects for TV series. So see how she's really grown. No? Her career has really progressed since then. So she has projects such as Hoodwink, Dayo sa Mundo ng Elementalia, I watched that. No? Urduha, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse series, Curious George straight to video, and then some productions in De La Salle College of St. Benilde's, Ferry, and Lego product animations. No? So her animation skills brought her to different multimedia and animation industries, including visual effects for local and international TV commercials, series, audiovisual presentations, movies, and asset creation. So Love is a certified TESDA trainer and assessor with certificates on national certification in animation and the National TVET Trainer Certificate or NTTC. So without further ado, I'd like to turn over the virtual floor to Love Afi.
Hi, good afternoon. So let me share my screen.
Good morning.
Ay, good morning pala. Alam, habang wala pa akong tulog. So anyway, can you guys see my presentation? Is it visible?
Yes, Miss.
Yes, Miss Lab.
Okay, thank you. So different from Miss ACOL, OCOL pala. My talk is regarding or more of my adventure or exploration in research writing. So again, I'm Miss Love Asis. So gusto ko sanang basahin yung script ko pero I might take ad-lib. So, and to start with, I graduated Fine Arts, majored in Advertising Arts, like what Miss told a while ago. Although I was aiming to work for advertising, my luck took me to animation production and computer graphics and visual effects. So currently, I'm working for SGS Asia Pacific, and I belong to a group of 3D artists who does rendering and animation for Lego. So at current, I'm also teaching at De La Salle College of St. Benilde. Actually, De La Salle College of St. Benilde was my first teaching experience for bachelor degree. Then after that, I was able to teach also with PWU and the La Salle University and Lyceum. I'm teaching different courses in fine arts, digital arts, multimedia, and game design. So when I first started with Benilde, I don't have a masteral degree. So after a few years of teaching with them part-time, I was given masteral grant. So I took my masteral with PWU or Philippine Women's University. My thesis writing is about Marking of the Past, the original content, full-length animated films of the Philippines. So during that time, my thesis advisor told me that my first draft for my thesis writing is worth around 2 or 4 topics. So that's why he asked me, Mr. Chong Ardivilla, my thesis advisor, that time, told me to just focus on one topic. And if you want to continue writing, you can do that after na lang. So, my wanting to publish my writing into print or online led me to different conference presentation. So I started my presentation with my thesis. So Marking of the Past, original content. It was presented at Society for Animation Studies conference in Nanyang University, Singapore. It was also presented in CHED in Manila in 2016. Then I continued the topics that was also discussed during my first draft on my masteral thesis. So next to my writing is Marking of the Past. So it's a continuation of the first one, Surmount Unsuccessful Full-Length Animated Films in the Philippines. So this was also presented in Society of Animation Studies conference held in University of Padova, Italy. And then next to that, 2018, Preparation in Philippine Animation, the title, which is presented at De La Salle College, De La Salle University Art Congress. And then effects of social media and in Philippine animation. It was presented in the 5th International Conference at La Salle, Lipa. And then I also presented the same topic at Asian Congress for Media, Arts, and Communication in Taiwan. And then another is employability of senior high school graduates under TechBook track with national certification in graphics and animation from TESDA. This paper was presented at Thailand under the organization of the CHED or South Asian Minister of Education Organization, or / Regional Institute for Higher Education Development. And then the last one, before the pandemic, I was able to present a research paper for De La Salle University Arts Congress, promoting arts and culture through animation and new media arts as venue for cultural tourism. So it was held in La Salle, Manila. So if you're going to ask me tips on how to do research writing, I'm not really an expert to research writing. But if I have to give an advice or tips on how to create or make a research since my writing is more of about arts, it's actually my advocacy to promote arts, animation, digital arts. It is related to my profession and my first love. Okay, I took up bachelor arts in fine arts, so I had my master's degree more about art. So that's then the next to it is research. You start books, you start authors with them, and all right, nawala.
Wala kami sa...
Oo nga eh. May nabangga ata ako sa something kaya ano.
I think it's your connectivity.
All right. Is it visible now?
Yeah, it's okay.
All right. Okay. So again, once you have the topic, you start taking notes, and while you're doing notes, you organize it in an outline form, which later this will be your table of content, and then as you go along and start doing it as a paragraph, you after that automatically a draft of your research writing will come out, and then the last thing that you're going to do is proofread your writing. I'm not really good in English, writing and talking both English, straight English or straight Tagalog. So that's why I need the help of a proofreader. So that's important when you're doing research. Okay. And then if you're planning to focus on presentation, like conferences, these are the things, or these are my personal tips if you're planning to present writing in conferences, symposiums. Okay, you have to know the organizer. You need to have a background check, so it's not just submitting your paper. Take note that you're submitting your own writing, your creation. It's just like an artwork. So do not just trust your artwork or your piece to anyone. So make sure that you background check. Do they have successful previous conferences or events? How frequent is their conferences? And what are the objective of the organizer and the conference itself? You also have to know the theme so that the writing that you're going to submit is timely and relative to their theme. Make sure to take note of the submission date and approval so that you would know when to submit and where to submit. Okay. Good abstract is the key. Try to make it limited in number of words. Most of the time, conference organizer gives limit number, or they give limitations and format, and they give instruction on where to submit it. And most of them are very, very strict with it when it comes to submission. There are also different kinds of conference presentation. We have oral presentation of abstract. Usually, oral presentation has 20 minutes presentation, 10 minutes presentation, panel presentation, main presenter, exhibitor, poster presenter, and some other event activities, depends on the conference organizer. Okay. Also, you have to know the details of the conference, like the preparation for actual presentation, like how many minutes you're going to present, are you going to present, who are your audiences, what are the number of possible audiences, what are the activities during the conferences. You have to also take advantage of the conference to gather contacts. Okay. You also have to scout around the location and schedule of talks or yung topics of conferences. Okay. Presentation rules, usually they give limit, and the presentation is more of clustering or grouping according to the topic of abstract. They also give format and other details that you have to submit with them and be prepared with during the presentation or actual presentation. And because the presentation itself has expenses, okay, it is better that you ask for subsidy or grants, especially if you're working for academic or you're affiliated with any school that you are teaching. You also have to check the requirements, okay, the contacts, the benefits of having a research grant aside from partner or subsidized expenses, and the citation, okay, the benefits when you present your research. Okay, you have to know that so that you can maximize that also. And then regarding citations, okay, the next thing that you're going to plan is the publication itself. Just in case you really want your writing to be seen in public, but to as much as possible, take a what you call this copyright. But before we talk about the copyright about publication, conferences do publication or print or online post their conference abstract and full paper writing, research writing. So there are conferences that only publish abstract. Majority of the conferences only publish abstract. And there are some conferences that there is another screening if you want to be included in a full paper publication, wherein you will be included in the collection of the journals or full writing with ISSN number or publication code. And then most of the time for conferences, since the abstract are published, what do you call this? I forgot the word. The abstract are being are sent to publication online. Included on that publication is the contacts of the writer or the researcher. With that contacts, you'll be able to get invites also. If there are publication companies, yung actual publication companies, that they feel your writing is suitable for their publication. Okay, you'll get an invite with them. It's up to you if you're going to turn it down or not. Okay, there are different rules and regulation about publication, and it depends on the company. Okay, you can also have your writing. You can send proposal to publication for your writing. Then on that, you have to wait for approval. There are set of committees, okay, that will decide on the approval of your publication proposal. And then publication types, you have online or prints. But right now, most of the time or majority online publication. Very seldom that you'll meet a print publication now. So in online, there are two types also. Whether it's online or print, there are two types. There are full or full publication or by citation. What do we mean by full publication and by citation? Full publication is it is monetized. It means you have certain percentage or profit sharing for every sales of the book or the publication. You'll get a share, so it is monetized. In citation, it means there's no monetization. It's free. And the only thing that you are after with citation is the number of citation. Okay? Because there are academic, it's an academic practice. For faculties to be promoted is one of the requirements is the number of citation for your publication. So you're not after with the money or earning for the sales of your print or your writing, but you're after for points wherein you're going to get benefits from the school that you are working for. Okay. So these are the writings. 5 out of 6 of my writing was already published by online and by print. Conferences like LaSalle, most of their conferences publish full writing online. So it's automatic that whenever you join their conferences, automatic that they will publish it online. So if it's important for you to have a published writing, then try to target conferences that publish full writing. So you don't need to work on how are you going to make your writing published. Because if you want to publish your writing, like if you want to monetize it, you really have to work hard on it. You have to communicate with different publisher. You have to send proposals. And every time you send proposals to different publishing company, your artwork are being spread without any compensation. And at the same time, there are scam in publication. Okay. I already experienced yung online scam, publication scam, wherein they're going to write that they are interested on your writing, and then they're going to publish it online, and so on and so forth. And then later on, if you check the legacy of the website or the person that you're talking to, they're not affiliated with the publication company. So there are times that the intention is to just to get your writing. Okay, so same thing with artwork. You have to be careful on giving out your artwork. Okay, do not trust anyone your artwork, especially not right now that we are transacting online due to pandemic. So just be careful with whom to trust your artwork and your writing or creation in general. So given that, you have to make sure that your artwork is protected, and that's why I'm encouraging everyone that if you're going to make a special artwork that you don't want to let go, or if you think in the future this will be a hit, okay, or if you have some research writing that you don't want anyone to claim, so you have to register copyrights. So in the Philippines, there are two ways to register copyrights of your artwork and your writing. You can do that through National Library. Right now, due to pandemic, you can do that online. So just send a scanned picture of your artwork or a PDF copy of your research writing. And then download the application, email them, wait for the acknowledgement. You will be notified also for the next step, like payment of registration, processing period, and then later on, about 8 to 10 weeks, okay, they will send you a registration copy. And then another is ipopil. Okay, same process, almost the same process. It's just that between the two, ipopil and National Library, I think cheaper to register in National Library. Very, very slight difference. But both ipopil and National Library, the goal or the objective is to have at least 50 years validity of your artwork. No one can claim it except you. Okay, so that will be your protection for 50 years. After 50 years, it will become public, I think. So I think that's all for me. Thank you, and I hope kahit nagkaroon ng interruption, you enjoy my topic or my talk.
Hello, love.
Yes.
Hi. We
Hello.
love your presentation, love. Anyway, thank you so much for that. I think this presentation that you gave us will really be beneficial to maybe writers, authors, researchers that we have in the Zoom room. Just to share with everyone, the NBDB National Book Development Board is now, I can say, among currently, because things change naman every 6 years. Currently, the more agile and active government agencies supporting authors, and not just authors, but I think publishing SMEs. So now that they have a proactive and advocacy-oriented executive director, now is such a good time to register with them. What are the benefits of registering as an author or researcher? Well, it's difficult really to get support for research, for publishing. We all know that, the researchers in this room. So there are, for example, government processes that are necessary for one to be able to participate in publishing efforts under the state. And it's important, no, because it's a good opportunity for people to contribute, no, their ideas, no, for the benefit of the public. After all, no copyright persists in the state. This is public owned, no, so it's a good opportunity. These are some of the good platforms. Available platforms for authors like you and I, you know, to register. So with all these ideas, you know, that you helped us with, no, Miss Love, no, and the tips that you gave us, no, I couldn't agree more, no, the different processes, no, that you provided us with concerning coming up with a research paper, getting the right people, no, to help you. There are workers organization, for example, like the Freelance Writers Guild of the Philippines. It's an entire network of authors with editors, copy editors. There are many types of editors, technical writers, creative writers, the whole set of agents in the value chain of publishing, or in the value chain of books and publishing in the UNCTAD. Anyway, no, so it's a good perhaps some of you, authors in this room or researchers in this room, might want to explore the possibility of networking or being involved in groups like these. Groups like these also are lobbying for the Creative Industries Act, which we hope, maybe with some more feedback and a little more revisions, will be beneficial to creatives like you and I. So anyway, just some additional tips for the people in this Zoom room. So I want to ask Ms. Love, you need not answer this now, but maybe you can reflect on this more. I have more questions actually than comments. So based on your knowledge, how is the ease of publishing in the Philippines? And what do you think of the support provided by academic institutions and perhaps the government? What can you say that the state has set up sufficient publishing infrastructure in order to support freelance researchers and writers? Because face it, not everyone has access to publishing, and SMEs, small and medium enterprises in publishing. Not many has access to that. You have now zines, you have DIY publishing outfits. There's a collective. There's an entity called Quago. Quago is both publishing, I think, in seller also. I think Quago has transitioned online these days. And then, so I want to know, based on your knowledge, or based on your vantage point, what do you think of the publishing infrastructure in the Philippines? And then, since a lot of your papers are on animation, I'm curious to know, since you're doing research on this, how is the animation industry before and during the pandemic? Is there significant growth, and what are indicators of growth? Is there a difference between the situation of freelance workers in the animation industry and those big corporations in the animation industry? Is there data on this? Is there a baseline data? So I'd like to know. I'm bombarding you with so many questions. I'm sorry. I promise to send this in the chat. And then, what kind of infrastructure does the country need for the animation industry to sustain itself, and for freelance creatives like authors, to sustain themselves? So, I guess rather than a commentary, it's more of a quo vadis, what I'm presenting to the floor. And creatives who are in this Zoom room, please, feel free to share your thoughts, and maybe we can process them later. Feel free to rant, and we can process them later. Anyway, so thank you for that again, Love. For I think it would really benefit the young authors in this group. The guidelines, no, or the sharing of the process flow that you presented to us. No? Anyway, no, so I will now transition to the last but not the least speaker. No, it is with pleasure that I would like to introduce architect Maria Bienvenida T. Candelaria. I think they call her Architect Bing. Architect Candelaria is a UST graduate. She started her career as an apprentice in a prestigious architectural company, Antonio Sindiong and Associates at China Bank in Makati for 10 years, no, since in 1982. Um, Her career flourished across disciplines in firms specializing in civil engineering works, landscaping, then finally the academe in 2003. No? So PWU is really a privilege to have you on board with your wealth of experience. During the first 2 decades of Architect Bing's career, she embraced opportunities for friends and relatives gave her the chance to design their residences, small commercial buildings, and a resort. Wow. So the PWU SFAD, School of Fine Arts and Design, became Architect Bing's home since June 2003. And she's a professor and a mentor, no, to many of you. So Architect Candelaria finished her master's in interior design at College of Home Economics in UP Diliman. She is an associate professor too at PW SFAD, teaching architectural subjects to interior design students. She wrote unpublished studies, unpublished, Miss Love, no? It's timely. Let's talk about publishing later. No? She wrote unpublished studies on board examination, integrated learning, CAD modules, and others. No? So these are valuable gems, no, that you ought to publish. Perhaps PWU can help you with that. And then her study titled Social Capital for Successful Aging, a Design Criteria for Bahay Sigla, was recently included in Bidlisew, a multidisciplinary scholarly journal, Volume 1, Issue 1. It was the maiden issue in May 2021. Oh, congratulations to PWU SFAD. So I now turn over the virtual floor to Architect Candelaria. Hello, Architect.
Thank you so much, Doc Layad, Bokiren, and we're really glad to have you. So anyhow, at this point, I'd like to share a study which actually relates to designers. So let me share my slides. Okay, so good morning, everyone. The title of my presentation is Social Capital for Successful Aging, the Design Criteria for Bahay Sigla. So the study explores various related preferences to classify concepts as evidence-based and apply to a new model specifically for the needs of the aged. This study discusses solutions to spatial problems based on identifying shared preferences of the elderly in terms of living independently with community support. Looking into the different evidence-based studies, a matrix is considered as its instrument to summarize the highlights which connect to design solutions for Bahay Sigla. Following the design approach, Bahay Sigla embodies an overall design solution that answers the older generation's needs. Hence, floor plans, elevations, and a perspective drawing have been put forth for possible pragmatic use of the design. Gerontologists can become active advocates for long-term housing options that emphasize greater integration into local communities. The researchers saw new results where elderly residents can socialize and affiliate with groups outside their homes. It is significant because the elderly people are not isolated. The related literature which discusses successful aging through mutual assistance between neighbors and the involvement of local groups include design solution that this present researcher has applied to the current study. Factors influencing the well-being of the elderly living in old aged homes identified through this study include encouraging a sense of independence and freedom, enabling productive aging, allowing spiritual fulfillment, establishing routine, providing basic care and support, being sensitive to their financial and health concerns, as well as ensuring an elderly-friendly physical environment. Green design solutions are visible in most developments, especially for the elderly. Based on the researcher's experience, her father preferred living in a rural area than in the city. The researcher realized that there is more to just designing pleasing layouts that fit the needs of the elderly. The social aspect should direct towards successful aging. The researchers saw how her father looked forward to visiting relatives. Thus, socializing is significant, especially at the prime of one's life. Likewise, many developments are seen around us. Politicians who belong to the old generation pursue their careers visibly. In this light, it is essential to accommodate the aging generation and their residents to grow old healthy based on specific conditions to improve their well-being. In addition, horticulture therapists have long understood the positive health benefits that gardening brings. It can lower blood pressure, increases brain activity, and leaves us with a heightened sense of well-being. Tending the garden provides positive vibes on an individual, especially the elderly. A study by Poya discussed the importance of horticulture in terms of stimulating emotions in people. The researchers saw a connection to garden therapy for the older generation. Hence, the study's framework considered the inclusion of this activity in the aged's everyday life. The study includes construction materials such as wood and stone. The users of a space prefer materials that give comfort and calmness. Therefore, this recommendation should be considered to add to a home-like experience for old people. With all this in mind, there is a need to customize design proposals specific to the older generation's needs. This study has been guided by these questions. What contributes to successful aging at Bahay Sigla? What is the need for a design model specific for older people? What architectural model is appropriate for older people? The research paradigm called pragmatism directs towards design-based research. The study aimed for a creative outcome that required production drawings following a design concept specific for Bahay Sigla. As an architect, the researcher prioritized specific users who will soon age. A 150 square meter lot located in Binyan was an available site for the proposed project. The house, Bahay Sigla, has summed up the design concept of the study. The bisigla is applied as a person-environment concept mentioned by Nussbaumer. It embodies all other ideas such as aging in place, social capital, universal design, biophilic design, transgenerational design, and place attachment, which can lead to a healing environment. The researcher went through related studies, thus creating the matrix that summarized the design criteria for bisigla aligned with the design model. The matrix contents evolved from concepts based on excerpts from the related studies to design solutions directly related to the associated reviews inputs. In the heading, there were 6 columns, which contain a description that shows the title of 5 related studies and concepts, namely person-environment, aging in place with intergenerational interaction, universal design, biophilic design, and functional design. The researcher emphasized the importance of a built environment fit for older people. It is essential to create a layout that will provide comfort for older people as their capacity decreases with time. The researcher of this study emphasized an alternative to institutional care. A related study capitalized on universal design as a user-friendly approach. Health, safety, and welfare of the users are essential so that the elderly will experience quality life. Provisions under the universal design provide convenience for the elderly in terms of comfort. Specified devices and mechanisms in all homes were taken into consideration by designers. Another related literature promoted mental, social, and cognitive wellness for the aged. The occupants of bisigla should experience therapeutic activities to add to their physical, mental, and spiritual fitness. Another related study provided an alternative to health solutions with specific medication. Older people need to participate in voluntary activities via internet connectivity actively. A home office with an altar served as a meditation area, production area, and communication area for outreach activities. In this way, social capital allows older people to experience activities that provide fulfillment in their daily lives. As a result, the researchers saw a common factor where living independently can still be considered based on the condition of older people. The researcher realized that a common factor such as independent living is preferred by older people. The term bisigla is where different concepts are intertwined and lead to an explicit outcome, specifically a dwelling for older people. Therefore, the current study showed a list of design criteria that answer the older population's several needs. The floor plan shows space allocations that align with the related studies concepts. The proximity of every space answers the needs of the elderly. A detached house with a home office allows the user to move independently. The home office, which provides access to the outside world via an internet connection, does not isolate the users from interacting with the community of acquaintances. The view of the garden offers a healing atmosphere for the elderly. Safety features within spaces like kitchen area and the toilet and bath, as well as color preferences for the interior space that fit older people, address the rulings on universal design. The second and third floor levels accommodate the younger siblings to assist older people when the need arises. The design solution as shown on the screen aligned with the suggested concepts mentioned in the related studies. The ground floor plan, as shown on the screen, comprises a garage, living room, dining room, home office, master's bedroom, kitchen, maid's room, laundry area, service kitchen, vegetable gardens, and gardens with decorative plants. The car garage that accommodated 2 cars can convert to an activity area for entertainment purposes, like family reunions or children's parties. Social activities such as this allow older people to experience blissful moments with a family that leads to wellness. The living room opened to a garden view with a wall-mounted television to complete a leisurely and therapeutic experience. The dining area's location is next to the kitchen and the home office. The dining table can serve as a conference table when the office activities call for the situation. The home office also served as a prayer room. The master's bedroom had its toilet and bath, and it had access to the gardens at the rear and the side. The bathroom and bath are provided with grab rails, both in the shower area and the water closet, to ensure the user's safety. The laundry area, which is next to the maid's room to avoid icers. Shelves are situated at the rear and next to the garage to answer the storage needs for carpentry, car accessories, garden tools, and the like. It answers the functional requirements of older people. There is the provision of the proposed second and third level plans, floor plans, to house the younger siblings and their families privately, utilizing a studio type setup. An intergenerational interaction is a healthy way of providing older people a happy disposition based on related studies. The researcher opted to specify lever-type handles for doorknobs, luminous light switches, warm lights, and neutral colors for bicy glass interiors. The non-skid floor finish is assigned to prioritize safety for the elderly. The cabinets have safety features for ease of use regarding anthropometric requirements. The study focuses on a goal for successful aging to create a built environment that allows the users to live a healthy life. The current study model is suitable for the proposed layout of bicycle. Creating an architectural model for older people is relevant because the law, specifically Republic Act 10366, seeks comfort for them. As designers, there is a responsibility to comply with what the required law states. Besides the law, there should be a residence for older people to help them experience something worthwhile, especially at the prime of their lives. With that, I would like to thank you for your kind attention.
Thanks for that, Architect Bing, for that enlightening presentation. Your presentation, I was going through your presentation deck since yesterday. So just to share that it really resonates with me. I have two elderly relatives in my life. One is my mother. She's a recovering stroke patient whose mobility is limited to her left limbs only. She's a retiree, so she is both senior citizen and PWD. And then another elderly relative in my life is, of course, my 101-year-old grandmother. Mas matanda pa siya sa mga heritage houses by 1 year. 101-year-old grandmother, she has dementia. And because of her condition, she requires round-the-clock assistance and supervision, because she'd often forget that she already ate, and then she'd get mad, na hindi siya pinapakain. So it's that, that's one of the instances where this kind of condition that one way or another, we'll all get there, requires round-the-clock assistance. So I think that's why multi-generational dwelling is generally preferred in the Philippines for households with younger family members, especially with those family members who can be designated to care for the elderly. However, this may be a challenge for example, low to middle income professionals battling the daily commute, for instance, with no other relatives to care for the elderly. So I think what you presented are quite insightful design approaches, also emanating from, I noticed, the programming of spaces that underscored social interaction and the idea of making the elderly active participants in a community. It goes for integration rather than the confinement of aging bodies, because that's the usual notion for an elderly home, that the elderly, it's an act of confinement or confining the elderly in a facility with little to no social interaction. So the design solutions you presented, I think, addresses that. So on the other hand, the study that you did, this presentation can perhaps, and this publication in the journal of PWU can perhaps serve as related literature for further studies on how to design public spaces also. So it's not just the home for the elderly, but you appropriate ideas from this study, theorize it, abstract it, and then apply it to the design of public spaces that would afford greater accessibility for the elderly and greater participation in community and even public life. So I see some attempts at this in some public parks, like Quezon City Circle has an open green space with accessible machines for the elderly. I'm not sure to what extent this idea of affording more accessibility to PWDs and the elderly is being extended in our public parks. I know it's not so much an idea being applied. You just take a look at the kind of sidewalks we have in the Philippines, especially in Manila. There are standard sizes for a decent sidewalk that would be PWD accessible to the elderly, and at the same time afford more accessibility to, for example, bikers, to make our cities more walkable and at the same time make our cities more sustainable by reducing the carbon footprint. Sa Pilipinas, yung sidewalk, iikutan mo pa yung poste ng Meralco. So there's really not much consideration of an elderly person, no, a PWD person, cannot navigate on his or her own with these kinds of public spaces. It's very different in other countries where there's that intention by design na to um, make the elderly, the PWD elderly as independent as possible, as they can, as much as they can, you know, with the design of their sidewalks, the design of how they design the city. To begin with, no. So for those looking for research topics, perhaps, no, I think Architect Bing's study can be used as RRL, no, for a broader study, a broader framework. And then perhaps, no, as mentioned in the journal that I read, no, this kind of design ideas can be prototyped and applied, no, regardless of project budget, I think, or scale. I think the scale used for this type of project was around, I'm not good at numbers. I've known less than 200 square, less than 200 square. So just imagine it being prototyped for larger areas, and not just homes, perhaps, no, but the design principles be applied in museums, in galleries, perhaps, for greater accessibility. No, so there, no, there are various degrees of invisibility, no, that are really so prevailing, no, and ever present in Philippine society. These degrees of invisibility range from the elderly PWD, elder PWD, and these need to be addressed, no, in the design of civic spaces and the creation of infrastructure, no, infrastructures that will care for the elderly. I'm not just talking here about design or infra. I'm not just talking of spaces here, no, but the very infrastructure given to care for the elderly. And why is that important? Because the elderly once actively serve the nation as professionals or even micro entrepreneurs who are all paying taxes. We are all paying taxes here with every purchase that we make. So wellness in relation to spaces and design typologies is an understudied research trajectory in the Philippines, more so design in relation to gerontology, no, and its implications in the design and governance, no, of public spaces. So it's not just the intimate private spaces that we're familiar with, but in the very governance of public spaces. No? So I think those are my thoughts, no, in Architect Bing's presentation, and perhaps, no, we will call back to the floor, the virtual floor, Love and AK to join Architect Bing, and then maybe they can respond. They can respond to the questions I posed and the ideas that I ranted about earlier also. And if they have additional thoughts, no, so we hear from, maybe we can hear from from AK, I think, no, AK, tell us more.
Yes, I think AK is trying to connect pa.
AK is trying to connect. Okay. Sige. Maybe we can ask, are you ready, Love? I sent you the questions I have. Si Architect Bing muna. Ang dami kong tanong eh.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry,
Pwede
what's
naman.
that? Sige, Love, siguro while waiting for AK, let's hear from you, no? Just to, and the rest of you who have further questions that you want to direct to Architect Bing, Miss Love, and AK, no, perhaps you might want to type them on the chat box so that we can talk about these. So, Love, what do you think? Again, let me just reiterate the question for the benefit of our listeners. What do you think of the ease of publishing in the Philippines? What do you think of the support? No? What can you say about the support provided by academic institutions and government? Can you say that the state has set up sufficient publishing infrastructure to support freelance researchers and writers? So I will put that in the chat box so that we know everybody knows the question. It's a compounded question, so feel free to answer as you
All
see fit.
right. Regarding publishing, actually, when I started my attempt to publish, I even look for publishing company that are accepting proposals. Unfortunately, there are very limited publishing companies. Print, during that time, I'm targeting print. So, and then the market is different from what I'm writing. So I had a hard time looking for a publishing company. So in terms of publishing company, parang I resorted to just because somebody told me that why don't you try first presenting by a conference so that you can gather more contacts about publishing, about people, about researchers and writers. Maybe you can find information. So in local, I think it's very limited in terms of publishing, both print and online. In terms of school, due to CHED implementation about researches, and one of their requirements in schools, universities, to have their colleges publish researches. So they encourage faculties and staff to do research, and that's parang requirements for CHED accreditation. So in terms of doing research, I can see support from school. Schools have different types of support, like grants. They provide grants for research. They provide also grants for conference. They also provide grants for seminars and studies. So in terms of that, they are very supportive because CHED requires it. Okay. At the same time, that's one way to promote. So one of the requirements to be promoted level in terms of level as a faculty is to have writing. So in LaSalle, if you are cited, they give extra incentive per citation. So different school has different requirements, benefits, support on research writing. But in terms of publication, none. Yes, none. Although Lasallian conferences on research writing, it's automatic that whenever you present a conference abstract, they will ask you to provide the full paper for conference proceeding publication online. Other than that, if they plan to publish internal, like in BNIL, they publish internal, like a collection of researches from their faculty. They have it collected in one book. They call it BNIL Research Annual. So every year, they collect all the researches from different faculties, especially those writing that was given a grant, so or support. So they collected it and then print it and distribute it within the school, the science school. But that's about it. In terms of freelance support for researchers and writers, I haven't checked freelance support in terms of outside school, but inside school, since I'm teaching, for freelancer or part-time faculty, they set limit on grants or support. You have to partner with full-time faculty for you to have or for you to access grants and funding for researches. So part-time faculty has to partner with full-time. What else? Did I answer everything? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I answered everything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Love, no? I see some colleagues here from De La Salle, no? How lucky you are. I'm checking the list of participants. Yep, lucky you. No, anyway, you also mentioned presenting in conferences, no? So, there are government, civil society, international non-government organization support for valorization initiatives like presenting in conferences. No? So, but then I mentioned to what extent are researchers and creatives able to access government allocations, no, for support for conferences in terms of mobility, and if there are allocations, how is the ease of accessing these allocations? No? So there, food for thought for everyone. No, you might want to start making that kind of inquiry. To what extent does government support creative research, no, or research in the creative industries? I might want to check government websites. I've been suggesting thesis topics and research papers for much of this gathering. No? So yeah, it's just that there's so much that we need to research on. There's not enough baseline data. No? And we need all the help we can get, no, in terms of establishing a network of researchers in, I guess, schools with programs in the fine arts and the creative industries. So for my next question, since you're doing research on this, how is the animation industry before and during the pandemic? Can you give a situationer?
In general, animation industry is very wide industry. It can bridge from advertising, different animation, visual effects, computer graphics, architectural, and so on. So if we're going to discuss animation in general, then it's a wide industry and it bridges different industry. But animation by itself as an industry, struggling because as you notice, we lack original content. Whether it's original content, full length, or original content, TV series or short movies. So we're struggling with original content. But in terms of outsourcing, we're still on it. But unfortunately, we're just third among the Asian countries, third or fifth rank right now in terms of outsourcing work in animation industry. So at current, there are other Asian countries that are leading. Even Korea has surpassed us. So that's why very limited in terms of animation project or specific to animation project. But those animation related industry or project like visual effects, motion graphics, and so on, it's still booming. Actually, it's still it booms. I mean, during pandemic, we thought that we're gonna lose job, but it's the other way around. It brings more job in terms of motion graphics and animation because most of the academics are asking for multimedia presentation for their lectures. So more and more people are asking help for multimedia or animation or motion graphics. That's why
are these local projects or international projects, or a mix?
Local.
Oh, local. So there's a growth of local projects for freelance creatives in the animation industry.
It's not that visible because we're working from home. And that's another thing. Before, most of the studios doesn't want artists to take home their work because of the confidentiality issues. But now they are very open to it and they're welcome to it. That's why right now it's not that visible that the industry is booming because of the pandemic, because everyone is working at home. But actually, more and more jobs are coming in terms of 2D, more of 2D or motion graphics. The 3D animation still not that good because we really have to invest with technology, high power computers, manpower, skilled manpower. So it's the same problem, but struggling but surviving.
I see. Struggling but surviving. Yeah. So if we were to map the creative industries into a sort of different pain scales, no, you'd say that the creative industries encountered growth, perhaps. The animation industry encountered growth, perhaps. But you mentioned outsourcing, no, and it seems to me that yeah, we're still export oriented. Pretty much how the agriculture sector way back then was export oriented, that led to the lack of supply in other creative industries such as furniture design. So yes, I agree. No, the idea of creating original Filipino content. There's a question here. No, may I ask the market? Yes, we can maybe address the questions, no, on the chat box later. No, so thank you for that, Miss Love. No, that was those were very insightful answers. No, and now can we hear perhaps from can we hear from AK perhaps? What are your thoughts on present conditions in growth of artist-initiated, not just physical platforms, but digital platforms, and these declarations, no, or these assertions, no, that what you are producing is the exhibit, for example, and its implications in the curatorial. Any thoughts, AK?
I remember I was having this conversation then with another writer, si Mariah Riodica, who, she was the recent winner, if I believe now. Oh, no. The last year's winner of Ateneo Art Awards. Kasi we were talking about yung online initiatives nga, and her part, she was archiving internet or digitally made Filipino work. So, turns out yung digital works na pala ng mga Filipino and even yung net art, we have like a decent, how do you say, parang decent amount of work, pero hindi lang siya nanonotice because I think partly because we have this bias now when it comes to yung physical, tangible. And it's one of the things na I guess if the Filipino scene has to acknowledge or cross over or understand, it's that kasi for instance, I think in the early 2000s, si Tatong Recheta Torres created this work sa Second Life, which is para siyang Sims, but you create an avatar, and then he created a digital gallery there with just parang plants, and so you create an account, you go inside, and then you explore it. So it was one of the first interesting execution ng video game and then internet art. But at the same time then, with internet explorations, the problem then is accessibility. Kasi not everyone has, kunwari, Second Life requires you to pay for a couple of things and then to have a website at least before you need to have your own domain. And now we have free stuff na rin, no? I was hoping, at least nung start ng pandemic, I was hoping that this would actually pivot the scene into doing something drastic or addressing something drastic, whether it's artist welfare or yung execution sa art. one of the things then na I was like hoping ma-address talaga is like nag-surface na yung artist welfare problem, which has been like a discourse since I don't know when, since maybe I was a student, but like na-reveal na siya. But then for some reason we're still I think we're still sitting ducks na we think na a way to make income is like through one way, pero there's a lot of things na you can do. And I was telling my friends na if there's one thing na we should learn from designers and illustrators from the younger generation ng Twitter is to be upfront na acknowledge na this is a job, art is a job, and you can sell directly or make like exploit platforms for your own use then. Because when the galleries are dead, the artists can't be dead. That's what I think. And at the same time, parang I remember then another friend asked me na like, is this a very anti-gallery stance? But I always maintain na hindi naman siya anti-gallery stance because I was also thinking yung workers then ng gallery who aren't they're like laborers talaga, the gallery assistants and all of that. And so if I'm thinking yung state of it sa pandemic, a lot has to be addressed beyond the aesthetics. It's also yung system itself. And I always wonder na is it because like is it a problem of the dominant taste nga or how the collectors would like to call it hashtag culture keepers and they want to just maintain yung 1% nung aesthetic na yon, which is affecting our definitions of originality, what is art, and so yung others, they don't really get much opportunities, and it's one of the things, at least yung state na na-reveal sa pandemic. And I was thinking na if we return to the same system after this, when this pandemic ends, then it's kind of sad. Kasi it revealed itself na there should be a sharp turn na like we have to make things better for everyone.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for highlighting the fact that it's not as if galleries are monolithic entities, but there are workers within these. And same with institutions. There are workers across the value chain, even in ancillary services, sustaining or crucial to the entire value chain in the entire art world. So yeah, and what you said about going back to the way things are before and how problematic this is. So I agree, that it's not like the problems, the gaps that we're seeing now are new, but I guess the pandemic sort of highlighted or rendered more visible and legible these gaps and problems in the art world. And you started talking about the differences, for example, creative labor, differences in space scale, the idea of labor in these galleries. So I just like to circle back to what you said earlier, in about digital platforms. There's this assumption that it's accessible and liberative, but then thank you for reminding us, the listeners in this room, that the ranges of accessibility is not always equal. So it's not as if digital is a magic wand that we all resort to because of the limitations in mobility that we have. On the other hand, some geographic areas don't have as much limitations in mobility as we have in overcrowded cities beyond its carrying capacities. So it's worthwhile looking at how offline and online practices have maybe flourished during this pandemic. On the other hand, I want to ask this question that has been social media thread fodder. Are curators necessary? Are curators necessary? What do you think, AK?
Are curators necessary? You
Yeah,
know,
during this
my
time, during this time.
during this time,
Yeah.
I work with curators na they really, challenge you
Mhm.
na parang you're more collaborators than something yung what artists are allergic to, yung parang the curator figure who becomes the author of your work. And I've also experienced those. Are curators necessary for during this time? I think feeling ko the question isn't whether they're necessary or not. 'Cause I kind of see them as also, in a way na parang creative workers din. I like to believe na they can do more than like I remember yung one of the initiatives na I like talking about during the pandemic was parcel exhibitions.
Mhm.
One way of alam mo yun, bringing closer the artwork to the people, the public, was to make the exhibitions travel na lang. So
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
traveling through couriers na Lalamove, Grab, Mr. Speedy, to the folks who um, sign up to see the work. So yung works nila is also very interactive. Like you're rummaging
Mm-mm.
through stuff. So parang na-break yung boundary ng when you enter like a museum that you have to act a certain way, view it a certain way, don't touch it. But this time, tangible siya na in front of you. And it was one of the initiatives for me na I think was very, I'd say smart, especially in this time na people are like nostalgic about going to galleries.
Mm-mm.
So parang yun nga, like, is the curator necessary? I don't think the question should be, are they necessary or not? Kasi it's like asking whether galleries are necessary then, or is making art necessary. I
Mm-mm.
think in some ways, it just it just happens. Like, does that make sense? Ayan.
Are you referring to the process of interaction and relationships being somewhat organic in
Yeah.
many
In
ways?
yung context ng curation in art scene, but also I was thinking then like when I said curation in my talk, like the age of curation,
Uh-huh.
it was about yung how we tend to curate our personalities online then.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And if I were to ask na necessary ba to curate online yourself, I could only answer from my experience. If you're a teacher, yes. You can't really post, yung sinasabi nga nila sa Twitter, like, yung kalat, you know?
Uh-uh. Uh-uh.
But
So the curatorial is something transversal, no? It extends from kasi in a way it also expands no the definition of
yes,
the curatorial kasi aminin natin it's very hard to explain to relatives just an instance no what you mean when you say you're working as a curator.
oh, ano lang
It's an
yun, like,
alien job description no it's not
oh,
even in the pisok pisik I think no.
I remember
Yeah.
then when I was in grad school, so it was 2009, and it was like the birth of Tumblr, I think, the
Mhm.
early ages of Tumblr, and then Pinterest. So may idea sila na they appropriated the term curation. Sabi nila, we will
Mm-mm.
curate your experience. We curate things. And one of the questions I asked my prof that time na, oh, this website said they're curating. Sabi niya, so what does it mean na they're curating? And then my professor said, no, that's not how you define curation. But like years later, you see na influencers make a business out of it then. Na they're curating their feeds. And syempre, if you're an
Mm-mm.
artist then in IG, you have to curate your feed na this is what they should see. Kasi your IG becomes your portfolio then, your online portfolio. And then I remember talking to Zeus then na asking na bakit ba kailangan hiwalay yung personal life sa IG mo. But then other people naman say na, oh, I have to be professional in this IG. So, nagiging ano na rin siya, like professional endeavor for some reason to curate yourself online.
Yeah, yeah. Because
And
it's the most available platform, I guess, and it's the most easily accessible way to, I guess, come up with a portfolio, no? And it presents a readily available design solution.
Curating itself is a colloquial term na rin.
Yes, it has precisely. That's why I asked that question. It has become a common, no, commonly used term. No, you curate your, I don't know, you curate your bathroom, you curate your living room. Curating is applied, no, that word itself, no, to almost so many kinds of acts, no. But for the benefit of students, MA and undergrad in this Zoom room, no, you can take a look at the publications of Patrick Flores on practices of curation to see how the identity of the curator emerged in the Southeast Asian context, also in the various ways it is used, and how it has evolved, no, over time. I think this is Pananaw 8 or Pananaw 7, if I'm not mistaken. I think the journal theme at that time, this was edited by Irene de Gaspi Ramirez, was on platforms of validation. No, so students who might want to do research on contexts of curation and maybe transformations in the Philippine art world may do well, no, to take a look at these sources available to them. And so just to circle back to what you said earlier, to what extent are digital breadcrumbs determined by choice and limitations? No? Can you perhaps enlighten us, no, the ones not so familiar with technology, perhaps on these? No, what do we mean by that? No, that tension between choice and limitation, or something being already in a way curated for you when you access or when you search. Can you enlighten us on that? It's a bit techy, no, but if you could just shed light on that for the benefit of our audience.
With the digital breadcrumbs kasi, it's like one of those in creepy moments na it's my phone listening to me. For instance, I was talking about shampoo one time, and then biglang this specific shampoo I was talking about biglang suggested ads. And then YouTube already has this new platform, new way with YouTube recommendations, and they will recommend based on your activity. So what happens is, like, every time you watch a YouTube, there's an ad, they will determine how long you're exposed to it, o di kaya kung skip mo. And then every time, ito yung interesting thing, like, it seems harmless, or every time you visit the site and you say, well, accept cookies, ayun, those are the cookies you have. So the cookies stay in your how to explain it simply, it stays in your computer as sort of like, para siyang, I call it breadcrumbs kasi I remember yung sa Hansel and Gretel ba. That stays in your computer for a while, and then those cookies send back information na, you've accessed me how many times? You've eaten me many times. So nagiging significant number siya. For example, with corporations who need it. For example, IG, ang notorious yan is FB, IG, TikTok. TikTok is known to be, they perfected that algorithm. They're very interesting. So they get these cookie ideas, and they try to paint na, this is a person who likes talking about shampoo. Tapos based on the social media information that you made siguro private na you're living in the Philippines, they're gonna assume your age. So siya. They're gonna streamline it. They're gonna assume your age. And then that's when yung mga invested parties in that information are going to say, okay, they're highly likely to like this product. So let's suggest it. So lalabas siya sa newsfeed. And then you might think na, ayun nga yung argument sa social dilemma na, sometimes you think you have choice online, but it's an illusion of choice, much like you when you're buying an iPhone, na you think may illusion ka, you have this illusion of choice, but basically you're stuck with the same smartphone, Android, for everything. They're the same phones. In the same manner, ganun din online, where you are being directed to click this. So they have a term for that na parang psychological marketing. I think they're pushing you to click somewhere else. So in one of the I think it was a Facebook operator, or Facebook, an um, ex-Facebook worker na in-interview sa Social Dilemma. It was one of the things that struck them, kasi it was, for them, parang it's very evil. It's very parang end of humanity, na it's really a manipulation tactic. You're being directed at a certain way. And of course, ngayong pandemic, ang dami din nagpa-pop up yung suggestion na you need this more, yung mga 3-3-5-5, 11-11, 15-15, because you need it. They will make it seem na you need it, or you need to click on this. So nandun yung mga recommends and suggestion based on that little information. A lot of people are scared by that, like especially sa discussion ng cybersecurity, like si Edward Snowden, he completely calls for removal of yourself online. But for media theorists like si Robert Gell, I think yung name niya is to work around it, to maintain that that nature of hacking, just as the Web 1.0 did it. It's interesting then kasi Web 2.0 was created from the resistance of Web 1.0. But also I saw Sir James' comment about where is that, curation.
Yeah,
And I think he said it better than I do, na where is that? I kind of want to read it.
On the production of meaning and knowledge, no? Or maybe if we may meditate on this more, or think of this more, negotiation of meanings, no, with not just the artist but the public.
A lot
also
of
thinking,
artists,
what kind of public is this? No? Because the public is not really fully formed.
I have to admit na a lot of artists then think na kasi when it's when my label na curated by, it's someone who art directs you. A lot of artists think that way. And sometimes ako rin, like I look back during my masters na do I remember their role then, or I forgot na. But I always think about that. Yeah, I was thinking na it's not a question of necessity, basta they have their own role then in the art scene, as much as art writers, gallery assistants. They have a contribution to creating culture then. Ayun.
Yeah. Thank you for that, AK. Very insightful, no? Maybe, there's always further opportunities to talk about this more, no? I'd love to ask, before I turn over the virtual floor to Mr. Noel Cuizon, I'd just love to ask Architect Bing, no, why the interest in gerontology and designing for the elderly? I think it's a personal question. Why the interest in this kind?
Yeah, indeed, it's a personal one. Now I just have to expose my age. I just turned 60 this year, and it was some kind of an advocacy. In other words, at this point, I said, since I'm already into research, why not look into this very, very sensitive issue? And of course, as Filipinos, we are bonded. Our families are bonded, and we actually recall our elderly. And so and I said, it's about time that I look into this. It's an interest that time. In fact, when I tell my students, what are your interests? So basically with that, it's something fulfilling on my part, that I had to do a design-based study, aside from pedagogical studies and others, or classroom experiences. This had to be, I had to do this. So well, that's why it gave birth to this study. And luckily, Doc Leo was kind enough to include it in the maiden issue of Biblicity.
All right. Thank you for that, Architect Big. No? So there, we have been presented today with the wealth of insights coming from different disciplines. No? So we have from architecture, Architect Bing, integrating gerontology in the design of spaces in research. No? So she's not just a practicing architect, she is also a researcher, writing about the use of spaces. No? And perhaps with her study, doing in an autocritique, no, of her design projects, no, for Bahay Sigla, for example. And then Love Assist, providing young researchers, writers, some guidelines on publishing and writing. I see Dean Torralba mentioning the initiatives of the PWS FAD and some initiatives from the NCCA grants program also. No? So it's one thing that institutions can explore regardless of wherever institutions you are. No? I saw a question there that maybe if Mr. Cuizon and the rest would want to address, we can address later. And then A.K. Ocal's process-oriented approach at once creatively theorizes on the self, cyborg bodies, vis-a-vis choices, and illusions, illusions and the tension between emancipatory possibilities and surveillance afforded by the internet. Data in the archive, the curatorial, and the art world and physical spaces. So it's really enjoying looking at the works, looking at her works on Instagram and in various social media platforms, her thought process as she writes about them. So with that, I just like to turn over the virtual floor to Mr. Noel Cuizon again, so that if you wish, you can address some of the questions. We can address some of the questions in the chat box.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bukirin. No? I wish we can extend this dynamic exchange. No? Maybe we can have another another section, like a sequel. No? Anyway, I just want to address some of the inquiries here before I think we're running out of time. Okay, so the dean has a good news on the grants, given by NCCA. Then there's a question from Mr. Casilan. May I ask, in the market perspective, what does the future hold for regional Filipino media content? How can we contribute to its growth to becoming sustainable industry in the likes of other industries like business tech and other matters? I think he's addressing this to all the speakers or to any of the speakers.
Can I say na first of all, na Filipino-made content needs yung mga small pockets of those who want to make Filipino content need to be empowered. Because I remember yung issue with 13, and they were asking na why Liza Soberano when she wasn't like a good voice actor, and then na-bring up yung issue na in order to get support and ma-empower tong content na to for it to materialize, they had to get an actress na maraming sponsor and maging like household name na yung animation ng 13. So if there's one thing na yung future for the Filipino content, we have to address empowering the creators first. So that's my answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. K.
Would you like to answer that, Ms. Love?
Actually, I answered on chat. So in terms of animation, actually, when I'm doing the research and presentation, so I realized that some Asian countries has government support in terms of funding for arts and entertainment. So they have subsidies, and they have financial budget for promoting or marketing the animation and arts and entertainment industry. So maybe if we have something like that also, maybe it will be a big help for not only for animation but the entire industry. And as you may know also that in the Philippines there's a little support for art industry in general and entertainment. So I think if we have collaboration of different sectors like government support, media, education also, we need support from education because we need more skills. And then collaborate. Maybe we can promote or make the industry successful in terms of original content.
Thank you, Ms. Lab. But Mambing, do you have any comment on that?
With regards to anime, I'm just hoping that we don't experience brain drain. You know for a fact that Filipinos are very skilled and very persistent and consistent in their workmanship. So I just hope that there should be financial support for this very promising industry. And I suppose this has to be encouraged because it has a potential. So I just hope that, there are, I don't know, what do you call them? Non-government agencies. I don't know who should finance and support this very promising industry. This is something that should really prevail, in our it should be part of the ecosystem in terms of business dealings and all. And the art industry it should come alive. In fact, in Dubai, remember there's this architect Pineda actually spearheaded the exhibit there, and it's actually a collaboration among designers and artists. And I just hope that look into that, and it's beautiful. The collaboration is great, and it actually focuses on our culture. But Architect Pineda has this idea of decolonizing design, and he wants to go back to what was previously done, and he wants to involve nature into the design. So it's very organic, very fluid. I just hope that we can look into that link on the work of Architect Pineda involving everyone in the creative industry, performance and all, and sculptors, and everybody is involved. So I think to do something across discipline is what the real world is asking us to do. That's all.
Thank you, Mambing. I wish I can address all the other inquiries and comments, no? But I think most of them are already answered, no, in the chat box. So we're really running out of time, and perhaps we can continue this colloquium or another conference, no, that can answer all these inquiries. No? So thank you very much for attending. And I think the certificates would be given. No? Maybe we can just close this session with the closing remarks from our Dean, the School of Fine Arts and Design, Josephine Turalba.
Oops, naglag yata si ano.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Is everybody there? Okay. So, yeah. So congratulations to all our speakers, moderator, and host, who are all both practicing artists, designer, cultural producers, as well as faculty. I applaud your commitment to artistic and pedagogical research. Your presentations have touched and contributed towards many of the efforts and directions of SFAD today, SFAD, School of Fine Arts and Design in PWU. Some keywords of which are multidisciplinary, research, collaborations. Ms. Okol has demonstrated a most creative use of the virtual as an artistic platform. Ms. Asis reinforced research writing and presentations in her lecture. Architect Candelaria addressed architectural design of spaces that cater to an aging population. Thank you to our very own faculty, SFAD, JCP Gallery Manager, and today's host, Mr. Noel Cuizon, for efficiently managing the flow of today's program. Thank you for the technical team of Dr. Laya for the technical assistance on the Zoom link and meeting. Thank you too, of course, to Dr. Laya, once my classmate and not too long ago, for your moderation, excellent intellectual insights and analysis, engagement and facilitation of discussion amongst our speakers and audience, highlighting really what the roles of artists, designers, and cultural producers are within society and our nation, and also how artistic, cultural practices are intertwined with those of pedagogy. Echoing what you've mentioned earlier, yes, SFAD is excited with our programming as we position ourselves as a major cultural as well as academic hub in the country, a home to practicing artists, designers, cultural producers as faculty. We are open to partnerships, research, collaboration, and cultural projects, both nationally and internationally. And in this light, I would like also to thank the upper management, administration, graduate school, RDO departments of PWU for their unwavering support of our efforts in SFAD. We look forward to more of this type of artistic research colloquia, as this is just our first of a continuing series. To our presenters, thank you again for sharing your research. To our audience, thank you for spending your time with us today and for your insightful questions. It has been a very enlightening and culturally enriching morning for us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Turalba. Now, I just want to share a brief ender for this colloquium. No? So our current situation poses many challenges to our work as enablers of art and culture. But part of our lifelong learning points us to the direction of problematizing not only our innovative roles and flexible tasks, to adapt to this new order of things. The symbiosis of theory and practice lead us to more relevant creative research projects. And echoing this paradigm, perhaps the current crisis is really a good time to do a research. There's no pun intended. With all this, let us promote a dynamic culture of research and collaboration. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng dumalo. And thank you very much to our guest keynote moderator for giving a very profound valuation and contextualizing the very insightful, no, notes of our speakers that they shared, no, their practice, their theories, no. Architect Benvenida Candelaria, Miss Love Asis, and Professor A.K. Ocon. Good afternoon to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much.